In this context, we have to understand that how exactly the monetary process basically works, and as well as what is the implications and why there are certain occasions, or is there any specific external shocks which have the impact on the monetary policy of the Indian policymakers like Reserve Bank of India. So, keeping those things in the mind, if you see that whenever you talk about the monetary policy in India, the monetary policy in India mostly driven by the Monetary Policy Committee. So I discussed certain issues related to the Monetary Policy Committee in the previous class. There are 6 members. There are 3 members from inside RBI, and there are 3 members which are external members. And generally the policy, whatever we are talking about, change in the repo rate or reverse repo rate and all these things, that basically always decision is taken by this Monetary Policy Committee before this implementation of that. So if you look at this chart basically practically tells about the monetary policy process of the Monetary Policy Committee. So before this start of this particular process or implementation of that particular policy in the market, before this particular announcement date, around 30 to 45 days before, the Reserve Bank of India starts a monetary policy survey. And generally the surveys are done with the various stakeholders, and they collect the data from them. After that, the stakeholders includes some of the market participants which are already investing in the market or which are participating in the market in the various capacity. Then what has happened that they collect the data, then they take some kind of assumptions with respect to this 10 to 14 days before. The interdepartmental projections basically are done. Some pre-policy consultation are done. Then they go for meetings with the top management. Then finally one draft resolution was made. Then finally what has happened that MPC meetings held, and governor basically announces the particular policy what they are going to adopt in the press conference. And after that, whatever minutes were there in that or decisions were taken in this particular meeting, that particular minutes were released for the public. So for example, recently you might have heard the repo rates became unchanged or the repo rate will reduce. Whatever decision were taken, that decision is mostly taken by the Monetary Policy Committee. And these decisions basically are based upon the different type of survey what they carry out around 30 to 45 days before with these different market participants. Then accordingly, the policy decisions were taken, and the that thing will be implemented by the Reserve Bank of India. So that is the basically process, monetary policy process of the Monetary Policy Committee, what recently we are following. Or currently this particular process or timeline is followed by this central bank whenever they conduct the monetary policy for India. Then looking at these reforms, if you look at the operating framework of monetary policy, particularly the corridor, what I talked about, the corridor process was implemented since May 2011. Since May 2011, this concept of corridor was started, and they were targeting this call money rate because that is the intermediary target rate what we can take or we can consider. And the corridor was the corridor like your MSF rate and this reverse repo rate, which is there in the ceiling and the base. They have said that the corridor should be a gap of 1%. That means 100 basis point around the repo rate. Then what has happened that from September 2014, the different type of other policy measures were taken. Bank-wise overnight fixed rate repos of 0.25% of their net demand and time liabilities, and the balance through 14 days variable rate was introduced. And there was frequent auctions of the 14 days term repo. So those kind of policy measures were taken. Then since April 2016, whenever we discussed about the introduction of the flexible inflation targeting, the corridor was narrowed down from 100 basis point to 50 basis point or 1% to 0.5%. And they also have reduced the minimum daily maintenance of cash reserve ratio from 95% requirement to 90%. So these are the two measures were taken whenever the concept of inflation targeting came into the existence. So these are some of the major reforms what has been highlighted by the Reserve Bank of India. Then what has happened that in this process, they started this concept of liquidity management. So the liquidity management, if you see some of the features of the liquidity management what RBI is following now, the liquidity management corridor is written and the operating target is still this call money rate, weighted average of the call money rate. The white and the 14 days reverse repo operation at a variable rate and conducted to coincide with the cash reserve ratio. Then they have to conduct this liquidity adjustment in that particular process, liquidity management process. The instruments like fixed and variable repo auctions, open market operations, some of the instruments like forex swaps, like currency swaps and all, they were introduced to inject or to absorb the liquidity from the market. The daily minimum CRR maintenance requirement is retained at 90%. And the primary dealers, the standalone, I will discuss more about this, but just keep in the mind, there are some organizations which are also considered as the primary dealers. They may not be the banks. So they are also allowed to operate in the money market or the call money market. And previously they were participating in the market through the commercial banks. Then further what has happened, they are allowed to participate directly in the liquidity management operations. So these are some of the liquidity management framework or there are certain kind of measures which are taken by RBI to maintain this corridor and as well as to maintain the price stability within that particular system. But if you see that yesterday or in the previous class we discussed about how the corridor is maintained in the period of this inflation targeting. But if you see that the policy corridor, there are two occasions, there are some kind of unusual situation have occurred. So this is the period which is after the introduction of the inflation targeting objective, and this period is basically before this introduction of the inflation targeting. So we have seen somewhere in the year 2013, May 13 to November 13, if you see this particular kind of outlier we can observe in this particular scenario or particular corridor. Then here, why basically that has happened? What is the basic reason behind that? If you see that here the call money rate was relatively very high in comparison to the previous period, and here also you might have observed that there are certain changes. Some changes also has occurred in the year 2016, but the major change was observed in November 13, May 13 to November 13. And after that, we are coming to the 31st March. So this period is basically also has shown some kind of downward trend in that particular system. What is the basic objective or basic reason for that? The basic reason for that is, if you see above, it is written, there is a situation which has occurred in 2013 that is called the Tapfer tantrum. Have you heard about this? Yes or no? Yes?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir.
None of you? Okay. Tapfer tantrum is basically a kind of incident or an event which has occurred in the year 2013 in the US market. So what exactly the Tapfer tantrum is? Tapfer tantrum basically is a kind of collective reactionary panic which was created in the US market. And what is the reason for this? The reason for this is basically the Federal Reserve Bank was slowly pulling the brake on its quantitative easing program, particularly after the crisis in 2008. What the Federal Reserve Bank was doing, they were in favor of the quantitative easing. So what is quantitative easing? The quantitative easing is basically a kind of monetary policy form where the central bank used to use this long-term government securities. Mostly this Federal Reserve Bank was purchasing the longer-term government bonds to increase the liquidity in the market. All of you know about open market operation. Generally, in the open market operation, we use the short-term government securities. But whenever you talk about the use of the or selling or buying of the government long-term government bonds, we generally have we can call it the non-conventional monetary policy framework or instrument. So what Federal Reserve Bank was doing, because of less liquidity in the market in 2008, they were following the process of the quantitative easing. So in this quantitative easing process, they were basically purchasing the longer term government bonds to increase the liquidity in the market. So that is called the quantitative easing. But in 2013, what has happened? The Federal Reserve Bank of India has announced to slow down this quantitative easing process. That means they were not basically in favor of selling more long-term government bonds to increase the liquidity in the market. So because of that, what has happened? The yield from the government securities has increased. The yield from the government securities has increased. The reason is there was excess demand for that particular security. And in that particular process, it will have the impact on the liquidity process in the system, or the total available liquidity in the market relatively maybe it was expected that it will slow down. So that's why they have a break on this particular quantity basing process. So whenever there was the investors or the market participants basically feel that the investor basically learned that this Federal Reserve was slowly pulling the quantity basing process, or to break this quantity basing process. Then in that process, what has happened, that the yield for the government bond was increasing. So that basically has the impact on the total liquidity of this particular system, liquidity of this particular market. So this thing is reflected in the Indian market also. So that's why there is some kind of spike you can observe in this particular process. And another observations you can observe in the year 2016, there is a spike. You see that this call money rate is above this what we can say your marginal standing facility rate, and this has happened because of the demonetization. The demonetization has the impact on this market to a larger extent. So because of this, you can observe that the call money rate was beyond this particular corridor. And then we are but to some extent it was rectified, it was adjusted due to this implementation of the what we can say the inflation targeting or flexible inflation targeting. So in this process, you can observe that now more or less exactly what RBI has calculated.
But the demonetization happened in November 16, no?
In November 16th, it was yes, huh?
So, but the spike is before 5th June 2016.
Before that, anyway, maybe it has happened exactly in November 16th, right?
Yes, sir, in the month of November.
November 16th, okay. So may not be. I thought it is a demonetization reason, but now you are telling that it has happened in November 16th. So maybe it is not because of the demonetization. It is because of certain normal market related factors, because it has happened before, right? From the graph, it is shown that it has happened before June 2016. Yes or no? Right? Okay. So maybe demonetization may not have that impact on the call money rate. Anyway, so you may ignore this impact of demonetization. I didn't minutely observe that one. Okay, you are right. So then what has happened that after this, because our basic objective is to compare between these two periods, particularly after this implementation of the inflation targeting, we have observed that the more or less the corridor is maintained, except two reasons or two occasions. So the occasions are not very much clear that why basically the corridor was not maintained. It may be because of the some kind of inflation with respect to fluctuations of the oil price, or maybe due to the fluctuations of some of the commodities like essential food commodities. But the thing is that there are many factors which is affecting the inflation rate. So in that particular process, maybe corridor was affected to some extent. But around 90% of the time, we might have observed that the call money rate was below this marginal standing facility rate, and the corridor was maintained. So that means what RBI was trying to say, or the Monetary Policy Committee was trying to prove, that the corridor has or the policy or the operating procedure of monetary policy is very much effective after this introduction of the we can say that inflation targeting in India. So that is what basically what we are trying to discuss here. So in that particular process, the inflation targeting has a lot of implications, lot of influence on the we can say that monetary policy operations, and it has to some extent achieved its target, whatever way the RBI is expected to reach that. But the question here is that already in the beginning we have discussed that the monetary policy or the inflation targeting will be effective if RBI will be given the autonomy in terms of the conduct of the monetary policy and choosing the instruments of the monetary policy, which instrument RBI has to use to conduct the monetary policy, and some kind of other autonomy should be given. That means it should be free from any kind of government intervention whenever it comes to the discussion on the monetary policy part. That's why across the globe, people always talk about the concept of inflation targeting. And whenever they talk about inflation targeting, they always bring the central bank autonomy into the picture. The central bank autonomy is basically what exactly it means. The central bank independence or the autonomy generally is related to three areas. There are three aspects always we consider to analyze about the central bank autonomy. One is related to the personal matters. Second one is related to the different financial aspects. And third one is the conduct of the monetary policy. So these are the three aspects always we consider whenever we talk about the central bank autonomy. So what do we mean by this personal matters? Personal matters means the personal autonomy or personal independence, if you talk about, that is basically related to the extent to which the government basically distances itself from the appointment, term of office, and dismissal of the procedure of the top central bank officials and this governing board. And it also includes the extent and nature of representation of the government in the governing body of the central bank. You see that whenever you talk about the personal autonomy basically deals with the appointment of the governor or deputy governor of the Reserve Bank of India, and what is the term period, for how many years the governor will be appointed, and as well as we can say that what is the procedure that the governor can be dismissed, or any topmost officials of the Reserve Bank or the central bank can be dismissed. So these things comes under the personal independence. But whenever you talk about the financial independence, it basically a kind of concept which is related to the freedom of the central bank to decide to extent to which the government expenditure is either directly or indirectly financed by the central bank credits. Okay. So that means if there is any kind of government deficit, so if there is government deficit, then it is the responsibility of the Reserve Bank of India or any central bank to fulfill that particular gap by issuing certain kind of government bonds. They have to raise the capital, they have to raise the money to finance that particular deficit. So that's why in India, we had a process called automatic monetization of the financing deficits. The automatic monetization of the financing deficits, because government basically is the controller of the fiscal policy part, which is related to the tax. The government collects the tax, and the tax is basically utilized for the different kind of activities in the economy, or government expenditure basically always incurred from that particular kind of sources. So if there is any deficit, previously in India, we had a process called automatic monetization of the financing deficit. Through that particular process, if there is any kind of deficit occurs by the government, then that deficit has to be financed by the Reserve Bank of India by the issuance of the government bonds. So that is automatic. These are the treasury bills mostly. The treasury bills were issued by the central bank or the RBI, and through that they raise the money from the public and the government expenditure will be financed from that. But the question here is that since 1997, the automatic monetization of the financing deficit has been abolished. So to some extent, now the financial autonomy was given to the central bank, or in our case, it is Reserve Bank of India, that it is not mandatory that if there is a government deficit, then it is the responsibility of the RBI to raise the capital from that through that particular process from the public to fulfill that particular gap. Then the most important thing, according to Fisher, Fisher basically talks about the what we can say particularly related to the monetary policy part. So that is called the policy independence. What do you mean by this policy independence? The policy independence means how much freedom is given to central bank for the formulation and execution of the monetary policy. How this monetary policy is formulated by the Reserve Bank of India or any central bank, and how that particular policy is executed to fulfill that particular objective or to achieve that objective, that thing should be completely with the Reserve Bank of India itself. So that is called the policy autonomy. So that means what basically we are talking about, whether the interest rate will increase or decrease, or whether the RBI or any central bank will use the repo rate, or they will use reverse repo rate, or they will use the other open market operation or cash reserve ratio, what kind of instrument they want to use, and whether this particular rate should increase or decrease, that should not be governed or should be controlled by this government. So that means how much freedom is given. So that is the most important thing what basically we should know whenever we talk about the policy autonomy. That means the monetary policy operations should be totally, completely should be in the hand of the Reserve Bank of India or any central bank. So that is what basically what we discuss, or we should understand about the policy autonomy part. So in this case, this is the way the central bank autonomy is defined. But the question here is that really this autonomy should be given or not? Should the central bank be independent? Or it will be better if the central bank is in the control of the government? Or for this kind of activities, the government should regulate them, or government should advise them, government should interfere in that particular process. By that, everything should be in order. So which one is better? So there are different merits and demerits in terms of the central bank autonomy. There are debates against that. So if you see this reason that if you talk about the why the autonomy should be given, so there are different theories which talks about these benefits of the autonomy. One is, we call it the time inconsistency theory. What this time inconsistency theory talks about? Generally, you see any governor, any Reserve Bank official, top executives, they are always adverse to the inflation. They are much more concerned about inflation. Their priority is that price should be stable, because monetary policy has direct implications on the price. So mostly they always ensure that the price should be in a particular range. So that is basically called the conservative central bankers approach. But in general, if you see that the government may not be that much concerned about the price. The government may not be concerned about the price. Government may be much more concerned about the growth. So which one is better? Whether the price should be controlled with a reasonable growth rate, or the growth should be high even if the price level is high. So that is what basically the question here. But generally what happens that in that particular process, so the Federal Reserve Bank or any central bank or in India, that if they are with the government pressure, then to some extent the price will be unstable. They will have the impact on the inflationary pressure. Those intervention will, because government always wants certain policies which will help them to increase the growth rate. So the primary goal is not only the controlling the inflation, the primary goal will be to enhance the growth rate in the economic process. So therefore, the autonomy will take care of the inflation part. Okay, that is number one. Number two, second approach, what we call it, the optimal contract approach. This is basically between the central bank and the government. There is a contract. So the central bank basically always will, the governor who is basically appointed by the government, they feel that, or the we can say that we assume that the central bank's governor's tenure or maybe his appointment, everything should be based upon the performance of this particular governor in the market. So in that particular process, if you see that sometimes how this particular performance will be measured, right? So the appointment of a kind of or the optimal contract approach, what we talk about, this basically says the existence of an optimal contract between the central bank or the governor and this government, and the central bank's or the governor's tenure in the office is conditional upon his performance of achieving low inflation. So if the central bank governor is failed to achieve that particular kind of objective, then it will affect this reputation of this particular governor. Then finally what will happen, that the governor may be dismissed or maybe some action will be taken on this central bank. So that's why if there is a contract, that whenever there is an appointment, the contract was made between this government and the governor, that they have to control these things in this particular manner. Then if the governor is not able to fulfill that particular target, maybe some action may be taken on this particular individual or particular entity. So in that particular case, the governor will be much more concerned about this controlling this inflation and other kind of objectives. So whenever that kind of concern is there, then if more autonomy will be given to them, then they will use the instruments or they will take the almost all type of steps in such a way by that those kind of objectives can be fulfilled. So if you talk about this, there are in both the conservative central bankers approach and the optimal contract approach. That basically was seen across the globe. If you talk about US, in US we can see the context of the conservative central bankers approach. But if you talk about the country like New Zealand and other countries, there they basically have the optimal contract approach. So there is a kind of contract between the central bank and the government, and if this particular banker is able to or not able to fulfill that particular objective, then there is a chance of the dismissal of that particular kind of officer or that kind of executive from that particular post. So that is why the autonomy will help the central banker or central bank to fulfill that particular objective. There would be no such kind of government intervention, and accordingly this price stability can be maintained within this particular system. Then another theory which talks about the political business cycle. And what this political business cycle theory talks about, this basically explains the interaction between the what does it mean? Basically, what happens, generally the prediction as per the theory, which tells that the business cycle basically mirrors the timetable of the election cycle. Okay. The incumbent governments in general will always use the restrictive policies early in their elected tenure, which basically raise the unemployment but control the inflation. So whenever any government is elected first time, they're much more concerned about what? To take certain policy measures, by that the price can be controlled, the inflation rate can be controlled, but they will not much think about the unemployment and other aspects of the economy. But whenever they will go for the re-election process, that means just before the next election comes, they will go for a kind of policy which is very much not in favor of inflation, but in favor of basically the what we can say the people. There is a mistake here. Okay, no, sorry, that is fine. So that is basically in the second phase, they will go for a kind of expansionary policy. You can add another phase here. In the middle phase, it is a contractionary policy, and in the next phase, they have an expansionary policy. So here you can add another. So the monetary policy framework, the government wants that they should basically decrease the interest rate. By that, the money supply will be more. Then accordingly, what will happen, that it will have the impact on the growth rate and employment and other things. And finally, whenever the same government was re-elected or any new government comes, then again they go back to that particular cycle. So there are three phases what basically we can think of. One is your first phase. Whenever the government is elected, they are much more concerned about the restrictive policy to control the inflation. And in the second phase, also a little bit the contractionary policy they follow, but it is not that restrictive. A moderate path they follow in the middle phase of the particular kind of political business cycle, political cycle. And in the last phase, they are much more concerned about the growth and this employment aspects. By that, they will go for a very expansionary. They want an expansionary monetary policy. Expansionary monetary policy means they want to reduce the interest rate. By that, the monetary policy will be, or the money supply in the market will be higher, which have the impact on the growth and the employment of the economy. And again, whenever the re-election takes place or any new government comes, then again the same kind of cycle goes on. So that means if the autonomy will not be given, then the political business cycle will affect the instruments and as well as the conduct of the monetary policy by the central bank. So therefore, the autonomy, if more autonomy will be given, then what will happen, that it will have always have a neutral impact on the conduct of the monetary policy within that particular system. So that is another reason by that the people argue that the central banks should be autonomous. Then another question is that the theory of the public choice. Okay. Here, if you have mixed up both the politics and economics, then it will have considered as an important proponent of the central bank independence. Okay. So whenever you talk about the reduction of the budget deficit, for example, if there is a budget deficit, that the central bank has to provide, already I told you that they have to automatically provide the capital to finance that particular deficit. But if there is some kind of autonomy to the Reserve Bank, then the public choice or maybe the public welfare to some extent should be considered before this automatic monetization of the deficits. So in that case, what will happen that it will have the kind of implications for what the people basically want. What is the requirement of the people in that particular time frame? So if there is some autonomy was given, then what will happen that it will have a certain kind of freedom to choose that whether this money should be financed by the Reserve Bank of India through that particular process or not. So there is another way that we have to think of, that considering this public choice, we have to decide whether this process should work or not. But if there is no autonomy, then it is a compulsion for the central bank to go for this kind of deficit financing. But if autonomy will be given, then the deficit financing will not be taking place in that particular framework or particular time period. And there are, with this advantages, there are certain limitations also. The limitations are basically what? The central bank autonomy lacks the democratic legitimacy. Okay. If you think of from the neoclassical economic perspective, that the independence may always have a kind of frictions between the fiscal and monetary policies or fiscal and monetary authorities. So independence may lead to certain kind of frictions between fiscal and monetary authorities, which ultimately increase the cost and also affect the development process of the economy. So that's why the fiscal and monetary policies should go together. But if there is some kind of autonomy completely will be given to monetary policy without the consideration of the fiscal obligations whatever government has and how the fiscal policy is implemented by the government, then what will happen that it will increase the cost automatically. Then that will basically have the impact, or that will hinder the growth process in that particular system. And another one is that maybe a significant divergence in the preference pattern of the independent central banks and the society at a large. Okay. So as per the theoretical argument, a strong central bank may impose its outlook on society, which result or which will affect the economic welfare. Okay, but that is again a debatable issue, whether really this particular thing will affect this economic welfare or not. It is true that there is a conflict between fiscal and monetary policy, or there is a conflict between fiscal and monetary authorities, which can have the adverse impact on the growth process. But whether really the independent central banks will have certain kind of impact on the economic welfare, that particular thing is basically a kind of debatable issue. Still now it is going on. Which one is correct for the economic welfare? Whether the central bank should be independent, which is better for the public welfare, or the central banks should be governed by the government, or should be always controlled by the government, which will enhance the economic welfare. So that is basically a kind of debatable concept, a debatable issue. Always we consider, but still these are the certain kind of limitations or certain kind of a case which is against this independence of the central banks. But already what in the context of inflation targeting, always we should consider that this autonomy is depending upon or we can say that this inflation targeting is depending upon the degree of autonomy given to the central bank in terms of particular the policy autonomy. So how they are conducting this particular policy or what instruments they are using. So these are the things basically what always should be considered whenever the concept of inflation targeting was used by the central banks. Now, if you see that there are certain indices which are available which measures the autonomy. I have given you some figure with respect to this. There are some political and economic independence indices were measured by certain agencies. So in that particular case, if you see that India's political autonomy score is 0.25 against this average score of 0.56 for the group of emerging markets. But the financial or economic autonomy, it is 0.75, which is same as the average score for that particular group, particularly after this discontinuation of the automatic monetization of the financing deficits and other kind of aspects. Less autonomy in terms of personal matters, because mostly the appointments and all these things are done by the government only. And already I told you that financial autonomy was given, some degree of financial autonomy. And therefore, because of the financial autonomy and economic autonomy, what we talk about, to some extent this inflation targeting is effective or maybe is able to maintain that corridor for a reasonable period of time, or maybe the after the implementation of the inflation targeting in 2016, still around 90% of the time we are able to basically maintain this particular corridor. So this is the achievement what this Reserve Bank of India has gained or has attained over the period. So this is about the concept which is very important issue from the central banking perspective, or the effectiveness of the monetary policy operations by the central bank. So that's why autonomy is one of the most important issue, but we have to always consider whenever we discuss about the monetary policy operations of the central bank. So here we can close the discussion on the central banking or the conduct of the monetary policy by the central bank. Then we can move towards the different markets, and what are the different markets what already we have discussed in the beginning. Then one by one now we can move towards the operations of this particular market, the mechanism, who are the investor, how the investment is taken place, and what are those different kind of policy measures are taken in that particular market for the development, what is the market microstructure of that particular market, and all these things basically will be a part of this different type of market what always we come across whenever specifically we talk about the financial markets in a particular country. Okay, we will go to that particular part. So you see that as per our plan, we have divided the market into different parts. So you need any 2 minutes break, or I will continue with the market part? Ravi? Ravi?
We need breaks.
2 minutes break. Okay. So you take, and then we'll start the new topic. Okay.